Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. The meeting between Hakeem Jeffries and Jared Kushner, supposedly to find common ground, is a slap in the face to right-thinking Democrats. Common ground with Jared Kushner. That phrase alone ought to stop us cold. It ought to make every Democrat who cares about democratic government, accountability, and the basic integrity of public life ask a very simple question. What exactly is Hakeem Jeffries doing? Jared Kushner is not an elected official. He has no public mandate. He has no legitimate governmental portfolio. He is not the Speaker of the House, a senator, a governor, or a cabinet official with whom a congressional leader must necessarily engage. He is Donald Trump's son-in-law. He was a senior figure in the first Trump administration. He is a monument to nepotism, dishonesty, and self-dealing. He is a man who moved through the corridors of federal power because of family connection, accumulated influence through his proximity to the presidency, and then emerged from government into an investment world where relationships built in public office became extraordinarily valuable private assets. And Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the House Democrats, chose to meet with him. That deserves more than a shrug. It deserves more than an anodyne statement about dialogue. It deserves close scrutiny because it tells us something about the instincts of democratic leadership at a moment when the country cannot afford political naivete. To be clear, this is not an argument that politicians should never meet with people from the other side. That would be absurd. Democratic leaders have to negotiate with Republicans. They have to meet with elected officials they may dislike or distrust. They have to deal with the Speaker of the House, committee chairs, Senate leaders, governors, and others who exercise actual institutional power. That is part of governing. There is nothing inherently improper about Hakeem Jeffries meeting with Mike Johnson, even if Mike Johnson's politics are deeply objectionable, and even if his role in the Republican Party's assault on democratic norms is profoundly dangerous. Johnson is an elected official. He leads House Republicans. He has a constitutional role and legislative authority. If you lead House Democrats, there will be moments when you need to speak with him. But Jared Kushner is not Mike Johnson. Jared Kushner is not a constitutional officer. He is not a legislative leader. He does not represent anyone. He has not been elected by anyone. He has not been confirmed by the Senate. He is not accountable to the public. What he has is access. What he has is family power. What he has is an association with the Trump political machine and the Trump family business empire. What he has is a record of inserting himself into public affairs while operating within an ecosystem where foreign relationships, financial gain, private business, and political influence have repeatedly overlapped. This is not a person whom Democratic leaders should be eager to legitimize. And make no mistake, a meeting of this kind doesn't for legitimacy. It sends a message. Tells the public that Kushner is someone serious, someone worthy of private access, someone who can be treated as a partner in political conversation. It elevates him from the moral gutter in which he belongs and places him once again among the respectable figures of Washington's governing class. That is precisely what should not happen. Jared Kushner was not a marginal character in the first Trump administration. He was not simply a family member who appeared at ceremonial events or attended state dinners. He was central to the operation. He was given a remarkable array of responsibilities: Middle East policy, criminal justice reform, government modernization, immigration issues, pandemic response, relations with Mexico, and more. It was an extraordinary amount of authority for someone with no electoral mandate and little demonstrated public service experience. But that was the Trump model. Public power was not treated as a sacred public trust. It was treated as a family asset, a political weapon, and a resource to be distributed among relatives, loyalists, ideologues, and people who could be useful to Donald Trump. Kushner was an embodiment of that model. He represented the idea that proximity to the president mattered more than qualifications. He represented the assumption that a family member could accumulate vast power without meaningful accountability. He represented the collapse of the barrier that is supposed to exist between public service and private enrichment. And during his time in the White House, he was present for the outrages of the Trump regime. He was there as the administration separated families at the border. He was there as it attempted to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. He was there as Trump gave away enormous tax benefits to corporations and the very wealthy. He was there as the administration attacked the press, denigrated civil servants, targeted immigrants, undermined the independence of federal institutions, and turned political grievance into a governing philosophy. He was there as Trump attacked democratic norms, openly questioned the legitimacy of elections, and treated the Constitution as an inconvenience. He was there. And he was not just there. He helped make that administration function. He helped give it an aura of competence and sophistication it did not deserve. He helped represent Trumpism to foreign governments and elite institutions. He served as a bridge between the chaos of Trump's political style and the world of money, influence, private investment, and international deal-making. That is what makes this meeting so alarming. The issue is not merely that Kushner is connected to Donald Trump. The issue is that he is connected to the whole structure of Trumpism: family power, foreign influence, political access, private profit, and the systematic degradation of democratic accountability. The Saudi relationship is especially important. During the first Trump regime, Kushner developed a close relationship with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. That relationship became central to the administration's approach to Saudi Arabia and the broader Middle East. And we should be very clear about who Mohammed bin Salman is. He is the de facto ruler of an authoritarian state. His government has imprisoned dissidents, crushed political opposition, restricted basic freedoms, and engaged in profound human rights abuses. Most notoriously, Saudi agents murdered and dismembered Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist and Washington Post columnist, in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. Khashoggi was a journalist. He was a critic. He was someone who used words rather than weapons, and for that he was lured into a consulate, killed, and dismembered. The murder was not simply another ugly episode in international politics. It was a grotesque demonstration of authoritarian impunity. It was a message to dissidents everywhere: there is nowhere you can go that we cannot reach you. The Trump regime's response was disgraceful. Donald Trump repeatedly protected Mohammed bin Salman. He emphasized weapons sales, oil, strategic relationships, and the supposed needs of American business over accountability for the murder of a journalist. And Jared Kushner was at the center of the Trump administration's relationship with Saudi Arabia. Then, after the administration ended, Kushner's private equity firm received billions of dollars in investment from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. Again, Americans do not need a legal degree to understand why that looks terrible. A man serves in a senior role in the White House. He cultivates relationships with a foreign government. He gains access and influence that no ordinary citizen could possibly have. He leaves office. Then his private investment firm receives enormous financial backing from that same government. Even if someone insists every technical rule was followed, the ethical problem does not disappear. The appearance of influence peddling does not disappear. The basic question of whether public service was used to create private opportunities does not disappear. And it should not disappear. This is the kind of conduct that makes ordinary Americans believe, often correctly, that there are two systems in this country. One system exists for ordinary people who are expected to follow rules, pay taxes, fill out forms, wait in line, and accept the consequences of every mistake. The other system exists for people with wealth, family connections, elite credentials, and access to power. They can move from government office to corporate boards, from foreign policy to private equity, from public relationships to private deals. They can fail upward. They can accumulate influence even when their conduct has been ethically indefensible. That is the system Jared Kushner represents. So when Hakeem Jeffries sits down with him to find common ground, Democrats have every right to ask, common ground for what? What could Jared Kushner offer that a Democratic leader should want? What does he represent besides the Trump family's continuing influence network? What does he know that requires private access to the House Democratic leader? What did he seek from the meeting? Was he acting on behalf of himself, Donald Trump, Trump family interests, business associates, foreign investors, political intermediaries? Was he sounding out Democrats about some policy issue? Was he trying to establish a channel of communication? Was he testing the willingness of Democratic leadership to normalize a relationship with Trump's inner circle? The public deserves answers. If Jeffries met Kushner simply to find common ground, then that explanation is not comforting. It is damning. It would mean that the House Democratic leader does not understand the nature of the threat his party claims to be fighting. Democrats constantly say that Donald Trump represents a mortal danger to the republic. They say he is authoritarian, They say he is corrupt. They say he seeks to weaponize government, destroy institutional restraints, criminalize opposition, intimidate the press, and undermine free elections. And they are right to say it. But if you believe all of that, you cannot then treat the people surrounding Trump as ordinary political actors deserving of ordinary accommodation. You cannot say that Trumpism is an existential threat and then give private legitimacy to one of its most visible beneficiaries. You cannot say that corruption is central to Trump's project and then treat Jared Kushner as a respectable interlocutor. You cannot say that the country is facing a democratic emergency and then act as if Washington's old rules of social engagement, private access, and elite courtesy still apply. This is a central democratic failure. Too many Democratic leaders are still living psychologically in a political world that no longer exists. They believe if they remain reasonable enough, patient enough, respectful enough, and open enough to dialogue, eventually Republicans will reciprocate. They believe that somewhere beneath the lies, the authoritarianism, the corruption, and the cruelty, there remains a normal governing party that can be persuaded to return to democratic responsibility. But that is not what the Republican Party has become under Donald Trump. This is not a routine disagreement about marginal tax rates, regulatory policy, or the scope of federal programs. This is a movement that has repeatedly challenged the legitimacy of elections it loses. It has attacked judges. It has threatened prosecutors. It has demonized journalists. It has targeted immigrants. It has transformed political disagreement into a kind of national betrayal. It is a movement in which loyalty to Donald Trump matters more than loyalty to the Constitution. That is the reality. And no amount of private conversation, no amount of bipartisan language, no amount of establishment etiquette can change that reality. There is a difference between governing responsibly and engaging in political malpractice. There is a difference between negotiating because the Constitution requires competing institutions to interact and offering legitimacy to people who have made their fortunes from their proximity to anti-democratic power. Hakeem Jeffries needs to understand that difference. The public's faith in politicians is already abysmally low. Democratic voters have watched party leaders repeatedly fail to meet the moment. They have watched leaders hesitate when boldness was required. They have watched the party's establishment attack progressive candidates while accepting immense amounts of corporate money and special interest money. They have watched as consultants and donors gain more influence than grassroots activists, local organizers, working people, and young voters. Whether every criticism is fair in every individual case is beside the point. The distrust is real. It has been earned over years and decades. So when Jeffries meets privately with Jared Kushner, he worsens that distrust. He confirms his suspicion that party leaders can deliver strong rhetoric in public while engaging in business as usual behavior in private. He reinforces the belief that beneath the speeches about democracy, there remains an elite political culture that sees everyone with money, access, or proximity to power as someone who deserves a place at the table. But not everyone deserves a place at the table. Some people deserve investigation. Some people deserve accountability. Some people deserve to be treated as what they are, participants in a corrupt political system that has done immense damage to the country. Jared Kushner should not be rehabilitated. He should not be celebrated as an international peacemaker, a wise advisor, or a serious public figure. He should not be elevated because he wears expensive suits, runs an investment fund, speaks in the polished vocabulary of finance, and moves comfortably among billionaires and foreign rulers. Democrats have rightly criticized Kushner's self-dealing and that of the Trump family. They have rightly pointed to the grotesque overlap between Trump's political power and Trump's private business interests. They cannot then turn around and make Kushner a legitimate negotiating partner. That is a mockery of justice and accountability. It is also politically foolish. The Democratic electorate is not stupid. Voters understand more than party leaders often give them credit for. They know the difference between honest opposition and selling out. They know the difference between a necessary meeting with an elected Republican representative and a voluntary meeting with a Trump family operative who has no public role. They know the difference between diplomacy and access peddling. They know the difference between protecting democracy and making peace with the people who seek to undermine it. Jeffries owes Democratic voters an explanation. He owes an explanation to House Democrats who support him and to those who do not. He owes an explanation to activists, donors, organizers, candidates, and ordinary people who are being asked to work, volunteer, contribute, and vote to stop Trumpism. Why did he meet with Jared Kushner? Who initiated the meeting? What was discussed? What was the purported area of common ground? What exactly did Hakeem Jeffries believe could be gained? And why was this relationship or meeting not something Democratic voters were supposed to know about? The fact that the story apparently was not intended to become public is itself worthy of suspicion. It does not prove corruption, it does not prove some secret agreement, but it raises the obvious question. If there was nothing troubling about the meeting, why was there no openness about it? Public officials who believe in transparency should not need to be dragged into transparency. If Jeffries believes the meeting was justified, he should make the case directly. He should tell Democratic voters what happened, why it happened, and why he believes it served their interests. And if he cannot make that case, then he should accept the political consequences. This is not a shrug and move on moment. It is not an inside baseball story. It is a test of whether Democratic leaders recognize that this country is in an emergency. It is a test of whether they are prepared to treat Trumpism as the authoritarian movement they say it is, or whether they remain attached to a fantasy that Washington's old social and political arrangements can somehow survive unchanged. They cannot. The old rules are gone because one side destroyed them. The Republican Party, under Donald Trump, has made clear that it is prepared to use power without restraint. It is prepared to attack democratic institutions when they stand in its way. It is prepared to make government an instrument of retaliation, enrichment, and personal loyalty. Democrats cannot answer that threat with cocktail party politics. They cannot answer it by signaling that the people who enabled Trump's corruption can still receive respectability, private access, and the benefit of the doubt. They cannot answer it by endlessly looking for common ground with people who are committed to the destruction of the Democratic Party and everything it is supposed to believe. There's nothing to be gained from that kind of accommodation. The task is not to find a way to coexist comfortably with Trumpism. The task is to defeat it politically, expose its corruption, defend democratic institutions, and build a Democratic Party capable of representing people who feel ignored, betrayed, and exhausted by a system that keeps rewarding the powerful. That requires leaders who understand the stakes. It requires leaders willing to say no. It requires leaders who understand that access is not wisdom, wealth is not legitimacy, and a private meeting with a Trump family power broker is not the same thing as responsible governance. Democrats can do better. They must do better. And when the party chooses its leaders in January 2026, members of Congress should remember this moment. They should remember the message sent to voters. They should remember that a Democratic Party cannot credibly claim to be fighting corruption while treating the beneficiaries of corruption as normal partners in political life. Hakeem Jeffries should explain himself. He should explain why Jared Kushner was worthy of a meeting. He should explain what common ground he believes existed. He should explain why Democratic voters should see this as anything other than the normalization of a man whose career has been built on the conversion of family power into private influence and private gain. Because democracy is not protected by pretending its enemies are ordinary adversaries. It is protected by recognizing the threat, naming the people who enable it, demanding accountability, and refusing to help them return to respectability. He is Donald Trump's son-in-law. He was a senior figure in the first Trump administration. He is a monument to nepotism, dishonesty, and self-dealing. He is a man who moved through the corridors of federal power because of family connection, accumulated influence through his proximity to the presidency, and then emerged from government into an investment world where relationships built in public office became extraordinarily valuable private assets. And Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of House Democrats, chose to meet with him. That deserves more than a shrug. It deserves more than an anodyne statement about dialogue. It deserves close scrutiny because it tells us something about the instincts of Democratic leadership at a moment when the country cannot afford political naivete. This has been America's Fractured Politics. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep the faith.